Clay, when you look at what we've seen so far with, as I mentioned, familiar faces in new places, Geno Smith, this was something that we didn't foresee happen because you were just wrapping up your show on the Chicago Sports Network, the Big Pro Football Show. I was coming into the studio to do the Chicago Lead with David Hall and Gabe Ramirez, and Ruthie Polinsky, the host for the Big Pro Football Show, runs back into the studio like, guys, and we're like 15 seconds away from there. Geno Smith is now with the Raiders, and we were just all dumbfounded of how that happened, Clay. So Geno Smith moving on from the Seahawks to the Raiders, but back with a familiar guy and Pete Carroll as head coach.
I think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. Obviously, they were heavily in that Matthew Stafford, trying to get Stafford over from the Rams, and they were closer than a lot of people actually know. The Rams obviously ended up signing him. So the next best thing, there's nothing in the draft that these guys really want to trade up for. Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, not like last year's draft. So they had to go. They didn't really love the free agent crop, and they make a move for Geno Smith, and they only give up a third-round pick. So for me, I think this is an excellent move. You're getting a starting quarterback. This guy was 10-7 last year. Yeah. It's like this guy threw for over 4,000 yards. This guy threw for 30-plus touchdowns. Like, Geno Smith can play. He was your best option. He's a guy that was consistent. I know Darnold had a big year last year, but Geno has done it for consecutive years, and he has a history with your head coach.
Right.
So that's something that is very important as well.
I mean, you have a new head coach, new situation. You want to have a veteran quarterback in that knows how to win. And you just laid it out, Clay, in terms of the individual numbers with Geno Smith. But put in those positions, he knows how to win. And it doesn't matter if he's in a different situation as well when you think of team-wise, because we've seen him have success with the Seahawks. And that's really kind of revived his career. Not even really, but it did revive his career and what he was able to do. And we know the famous quote of him saying that, people wrote him off, but he didn't right back. And, you can probably frame that and put that in your living room wall and on your living room wall because it was such a great quote. But Smith still has something left with him. Now, the bigger question that I have for this Raiders team is, what do you add to this offense to make sure that Geno Smith can resemble the guy that we saw in Seattle putting up those big numbers and have this team in the playoffs?
I think you go maybe receiver or running back. I think you go skill position because that's what they need. Geno is coming from a great receiver room. You could honestly say that his receiving room has actually gotten worse going from Seattle where he had DK, he had Tyler Lockett, he had Jackson Smith and Jigba. He had a solid receiving group. Offensive line in Seattle was not good, and he does have Brock Bowers, but maybe Tet, the receiver from Arizona, or maybe Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton. You go somewhere there. And here's a number I thought was interesting. When Smith was with Carroll, he was a 2-time Pro Bowl selection, had 8,641 passing yards, 55 touchdowns to 21 interceptions in only 37 games.
Wow.
Pete Carroll, he's had success with Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Now you're getting him back with Pete Carroll. Chip Kelly, say what you will about Chip Kelly, the last time he's in the NFL, you saw he was able to adapt last year when he was with Ohio State.
Right.
He wasn't running the gimmicky Chip Kelly offense. And trust me, I'm not a big Chip Kelly fan. Chip Kelly cut me after Andy Reid got fired from the Eagles.
So that's where the energy is coming from a little bit.
And he brought a couple of tight ends in. But I think Chip Kelly did an excellent job. He won the national championship. He moved to a pro-style offense. He adapted. And that's what I love to see from offensive coordinators and what matters. It's something when you talk about the Chicago Bears. Shane Waldron wasn't able to adapt to his players. He tried to run Geno Smith's playbook in Chicago with a different quarterback. Chip Kelly showed me he knows how to adapt, run the pro-style offense, run the football when you have Travion Henderson, when you have these big running backs, this big offensive line. So I'm excited to see the pairing between Chip Kelly, Geno Smith, and then obviously with Pete Carroll there on the background.
Yeah, it makes for an interesting situation, especially for a guy in Geno coming off of last year at 34. He's only 34, but still 70% of his passes that he completed. You laid out the numbers and what he was able to do just with his passing yards and, of course, with his touchdowns. But I think it's a great situation for Pete Carroll because as a new head coach with a team like the Raiders in that division, we're talking AFC
That's a
West.
tough division.
We
man.
know that it's been really, they should rename it the Kansas City division, really, because they've
That's
just been
the
that
downside,
dominant.
too.
But you have legitimate, great competitors when it comes to the Chiefs, of course, but then also the Chargers and what we saw from them last year and Jim Harbaugh.
I think that team's ready to explode this year.
Yeah.
They had three teams make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think last year, remember they got destroyed by the Texans. Just didn't and Justin Herbert was on his back the entire game. But I feel like they were a year ahead of schedule, right? That Jim Harbaugh usually comes in, kind of cleans house. He got rid of Keenan Allen, right? Got rid of a lot of guys, and then this year he got rid of Joey Bosa. I think that this team is getting ready to take the next step this year and can really compete with the Chiefs for that AFC West title.
So here's a question when we continue on with the Geno Smith conversation, because now, as I mentioned, he's 34, and you're in that division with three teams that made the playoffs. One of the teams was obviously in the Super Bowl, has won 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. Would you find yourself, and do you find yourself in a difficult situation when you look at maybe a year, 2, maybe even 3 years down the road where you have to run it back again with a quarterback? Or with this upcoming draft, do you decide to make a decision and draft a young quarterback where they can learn under Geno Smith, so where that transition from Smith to that younger quarterback isn't as difficult? I mean, you're going to have your rough spots for a first-time quarterback going into a situation where this is now you're the guy after learning from the veteran after a year or two. But still, I think it would be smart on the Raiders' part, Clay, to go quarterback in this upcoming draft.
I think you're right there, Cam, and especially with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think those are guys that are players. You've seen flashes from them, and they've done some really good things.
Yeah.
I like both their guys' stories. Both of them came from FCS to big-time schools and just showed that they can grow. They showed the possibility of growth. I mean, Cam Ward went from FCS, and he went to Washington State. Then he goes to Miami. He had success in every single place. Learning that many different playbooks tells me this guy's smart.
Yeah.
Tells me this guy's intelligent. Tells me this guy can pick up a new playbook. Then you put him with a year or two behind a guy like Geno Smith. I mean, I think that would be great for him. And I don't know if he would be a guy that'd be up for that, but you explain it to him like, hey, you're a guy. You're going to learn from a guy that's done it, that's had an up and down career, and you explain it to him that way. And I think you're absolutely right, Cam. That could be a good move for them. But Tet McMillan, the receiver, another option. Ashton Jeanty, if you don't go quarterback, but just getting more weapons on that team, because Pete Carroll, he wants to win now. He don't want to wait. This man he's 74 years old.
I was going to say, right.
This is when he coaches his first game with the Raiders, he will be the oldest head coach in NFL history.
Wow.
Okay, he needs to win yesterday.
Yeah.
He needs to win yesterday. And you look at the Raiders, why I say Ashton Jeanty, they were 31st in rushing yards per game. You need to get a running game. Obviously, it comes a lot with the offensive line. They didn't have great quarterback play, but you got to figure out something to run the ball to take some pressure off of Geno as well.
And that was my point that I was going to make right when you said it. It's just like you don't want to have that pressure on Geno every single play where he has to be the guy. And that's going to wear down a guy in a division, in a league where they're going to scheme against Geno Smith of how you can take him away. Because if you can take Geno Smith away, then it just makes your job easier as a defense to really go against this Raiders team. And again, it's going to take a lot. I think the Raiders aren't done in terms of dealing and trying to get free agents or making trades to shore up that offense. But the draft is one area for me, just, again, looking at that quarterback position and who could be available depending on when the Raiders are there at their spot, their time to draft, of what decision that they make. And it's not so much on the name, but the position. I would be shocked, guys, if they go with a running back in Jeanty, who's a great player. No disrespect to Ashton Jeanty, but it feels like with what they need, just as a succession plan after Geno Smith, you get that younger quarterback in. If it's Cam Ward, if it's Shedeur Sanders, if it's someone else on that quarterback board that you can really feel confident in to get them into that situation, knowing that if they're going to be the successor of Geno Smith, that would be the move that I would make if I'm in that Raiders front office.
I like it. How do you feel about the Seahawks in this trade? I've been going back and forth. I think that maybe they saw it as, we could save some money. We can get a draft pick, and Sam Darnold's just as good as Geno Smith if we have a chance to get Sam Darnold. I mean, how do you see the Seahawks coming out of this trade, especially with them releasing Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf asking for a trade? They're in this real transitional period for a team that was 10-7 and just missed the playoffs last year.
And that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for Seahawks fans. And we work with a guy over the Chicago Sports Network that is from Seattle, and a huge Seahawks fan. And when he got the news of Geno Smith being traded, he was just like, okay, this is what's going to happen. I guess we're in rebuild mode, because obviously Tyler Lockett is gone, Geno Smith gone now. And if I'm DK Metcalf, Clay, I'm looking around the rest of the building like, why am I still here? I'm on the phone with my agent, like, get me out of here, because I do not want to stay in this situation in Seattle where I have no familiarity, no chemistry with the quarterback who's going to be QB1. We don't know who that is at this point now. Obviously, there are options out there from them free agency-wise. Don't go the Aaron Rodgers route. That's no, Seattle doesn't want to do that. But if I'm DK Metcalf, I want to find another destination. And let's just be real about this. The situation with DK in Seattle wasn't always the best. We know that DK, and with a lot of receivers in the NFL, they have a very, how should I put this? Detailed personality. I'll put it that way. Detailed personality, where if they're not getting the attention when it comes to the plays or passes being thrown their way, you're going to see those frustrations on the sideline. So for Seattle, with just, and let's just be real about it, I feel like they're in a rebuild. That's what it is. And I don't think DK Metcalf stays around for this thing. So for a team that won 10 ball games last year, and now you're basically having your entire offense flip because Geno Smith is one of a few guys that I'm sure will leave. He's already left, but with Tyler Lockett, I'm sure DK is going to be gone. You still have something there with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I think is a really great young receiver. So you have a foundation there. If you decide to trade DK Metcalf, you can lean on that. But for Seahawks fans, it feels like just the sky has parted and like thunder is coming down on your heads.
And not only Tyler Lockett, they released Josh Jobe, they released tackle George Font, Rayshon Jenkins, Draymond Jones, and Roy Robertson Harris. And these aren't huge names, but these are guys that played a part in the Seahawks team. These are some veteran guys. So to me, it's curious, because if you're a team that maybe won 6, 7, 5 games last year, okay, maybe it's time for rebuild. You won 10.
Yeah.
You're not that far off.
Right.
You win one more game, you're in the playoffs, you're an 11-win team. I mean, there was a couple of close games there, and your offensive line was that shaky. So for me, I just think it's curious to why you want to try and start this, what seems to be a rebuild now. And I know, maybe they get Sam Darnold, and Darnold did have some time with the new offensive coordinator when he was in San Francisco. So maybe they say, hey, this is the same player. Maybe they think, we're not even downgrading. We're getting Geno Smith what he was, because obviously Sam Darnold's only 27, Geno Smith's at 34. And Sam Darnold it's funny, because if you look at his career trajectory, a little bit of Geno Smith in there.
It is.
Geno Smith, high draft pick. Yeah. Geno Smith, struggle. You already talked about it. They wrote me off. I didn't write back. Sam Darnold, tough, struggle. Big guys opportunity, big year. So he's kind of on that trajectory. Maybe they think, we're getting Geno at the start. This guy's only 27. We're not going to sign him to a long-term deal. He's 34 years old, and now we're going younger. We're getting the next Geno, and we're going to have a lot more runway with this guy. So this remains to be seen, but my inclination is the Seahawks will go after Sam Darnold, and that's going to have a ripple effect, because now who goes to Minnesota? You're not just going to count on J.J. McCarthy right now. You're going to have is Daniel Jones coming back? Who's going to be the security blanket for J.J. McCarthy? So I think it's going to have this is going to be a huge spiral effect on what happens here.
Yeah, Randy, what do you think of the situation with Seattle? I mean, just what we saw from them last year, how they were almost right there for another playoff berth, but obviously just the wickedness of the NFL schedule and how things just play out, they ended up being eliminated.
I mean, they were close in so many games. I remember a game late in the season against the Vikings where they took the lead late and then gave up the long touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson and lost. So, I felt like they were always just a step short, right? But I don't know. I think it's a smart move to get rid of Geno Smith, because where are you really going with Geno Smith? And maybe it didn't work out with what you had, so maybe rebuild and start new.
All right, Seahawks fans, hey, the rebuild is there, so just, take cover and just, I don't know, pray to the football gods that it's shorter than longer when it comes to this rebuild that you have going on.